The WNBA has been riding the Caitlin Clark wave like it's a golden ticket, and in many ways, it is. Since she entered the league, merchandise sales have exploded, team valuations have jumped, app engagement has surged, and television viewership has hit levels the WNBA has dreamed about for decades. The Indiana Fever schedule has essentially become a traveling showcase, with sold-out arenas in every city and ticket prices spiking on resale sites. If you're here for the real story and not the filtered version, subscribe. And if you're sticking around for the next meltdown, you better definitely subscribe. You'd think a league in this position would do everything in its power to protect the player responsible for this boom. You'd think they'd treat her like a priceless investment, the way other leagues guard their biggest stars like a crown jewel. But instead, we've seen something very different, something troubling. From the start of her rookie season, Clark has been targeted with an unusually high number of hard fouls and aggressive off-ball contact. And not just a little more than average. By the numbers, she absorbed 17% of all flagrant or hard fouls in the entire league. That's more than double what her peers have endured. She's getting shoved, blindsided, body-checked. And the response from the league? Silence. That silence is starting to speak volumes. Because it's one thing for a player to take a few hard hits over the course of a season. That's part of the game. But when it's constant, when the rate is this high, and when officials and league leadership consistently look the other way, it becomes something else entirely. It becomes a pattern. And patterns, especially in the workplace, carry legal implications. This is where things get serious. The conversation has now shifted from sports talk to legal talk, specifically Title VII of the Civil Rights Act. For anyone who doesn't know, Title VII isn't just about traditional office jobs. It covers any employment situation. And yes, that includes professional athletes in a league like the WNBA. One of the provisions deals with what's called a hostile work environment. That's when an employee is subjected to repeated, targeted, and harmful treatment that the employer either ignores or fails to address properly. And here's the kicker. A hostile work environment doesn't have to be verbal harassment. It can also be physical. In the context of sports, that means if a player is being repeatedly and excessively targeted in ways that go beyond normal gameplay, and the league doesn't step in, it could absolutely fall under that definition. So now you've got lawyers saying what a lot of fans have been thinking. Caitlin Clark's rights might actually be getting violated. And if that's true, this isn't just a PR problem for the WNBA. It's a legal problem, a potentially federal legal problem. It's not like other leagues haven't dealt with this before. The NBA, for example, has a long history of protecting its marquee players. Refs are instructed to tighten the whistle when the stars are getting hammered too much. Not because they want to make the game soft, but because they understand the business. If a star gets injured from repeated, unchecked targeting, it's not just that player's career at risk. It's the entire product. The WNBA, for reasons that baffle a lot of observers, seems to be taking the exact opposite approach with Clark. Part of the speculation about why this is happening has to do with resentment, both professional and possibly racial. Even WNBA MVP Aya Wilson has noted that race plays a role in how Clark is perceived and treated. She's a young white player who came into the league with more hype than maybe anyone in WNBA history. She's pulling in endorsements, national headlines, and a level of attention that some veterans never received, even after years of success. That's bound to rub some people the wrong way. Add in the professional jealousy factor. The idea that someone just a few months into their pro career is already the face of the league, and you've got a recipe for tension. On the court, that tension can manifest as sending a message through physical play. Off the court, it can manifest as indifference from those in charge, especially if they see Clark as a disruptor to the established hierarchy. But here's the problem. Regardless of whether those feelings exist, the league has a legal duty to act if the targeting crosses the line into creating an unsafe environment. This isn't optional. It's not something they can brush off by saying, it's just how the game is played. If the WNBA allows Clark to be treated this way and fails to protect her, they could be opening themselves up to lawsuits. And those lawsuits could very well attract federal attention. Congressional investigations into sports leagues aren't unheard of. All it takes is one high-profile player, one credible legal claim, and one lawmaker willing to make a statement about fairness, safety, and civil rights. In Clark's case, that groundwork is already being laid. We've seen public statements from lawmakers demanding answers. We've seen high-profile media figures call for the league to step in. And now, with lawyers framing this as a Title VII issue, the pressure is only going to mount. The PR disaster here is almost as big as the legal one. Think about the optics. The WNBA spends years begging for more attention. Finally gets a star who draws massive crowds and headlines, and then lets it get knocked around without stepping in to protect her. That's not just bad business. It's baffling. The numbers tell the story. In her rookie season alone, Clark accounted for more merchandise sales than some entire teams. The WNBA app saw a massive spike in subscriptions after her debut. Indiana Fever games, home and away, became events. Even teams that had struggled to fill seats suddenly saw sellouts when the Fever came to town. That's millions of dollars in value, created directly because of her presence. And yet, when she shoved the floor on a blindside hit, or takes an elbow in transition, the most the league does is hand out the occasional retroactive fine. If that. No suspensions, no rule clarifications, no public commitment to making sure she's protected. That inaction is dangerous for more than just Clark. It sends a message to every player in the league. If you become a lightning rod for hard fouls, you're on your own. That's not the kind of culture that keeps stars happy, and it's not the kind of message that makes new talent excited to join. There's also a risk here that extends beyond Clark's personal safety and career longevity. If this situation escalates into an actual legal battle, the details will be public. Court filings, testimonies, depositions, all of it would be on the record. That means every past incident, every ignored complaint, every missed opportunity to act would be scrutinized. Sponsors don't like that kind of heat. Networks don't like that kind of heat. And fans, especially new ones who came to the league because of Clark, might not stick around to watch it play out. The irony is that the WNBA doesn't need to reinvent the wheel to fix this. Other leagues have provided the blueprint. Adjust officiating to prevent dangerous play, hold repeat offenders accountable with real consequences, and publicly reaffirm the league's commitment to protecting all players equally. None of that would soften the game or make it less competitive. It would simply make it safer and fairer. Instead, the league has allowed this to fester. And now, the conversation isn't just about basketball anymore. It's about civil rights law, federal oversight, and whether one of the fastest rising stars in sports is being failed by the very league she's elevating. For Clark, the focus will always be on playing the game. But for the people running the WNBA, the focus has to be on ensuring that game is one where her rights are respected. If they don't act, and act quickly, they risk not only losing her trust, but potentially losing her entirely to a rival league or overseas team that promises better conditions. Because here's the truth. No player, no matter how loyal, is going to stay in a situation where they're treated as expendable. And if the WNBA lets this slide, they won't just be losing Caitlin Clark. They'll be losing the credibility they've worked for decades to build. What makes the WNBA's inaction so baffling is that they've been handed an unprecedented opportunity. And instead of seizing it, they're flirting with self-sabotage. Caitlin Clark is not a fringe player whose treatment can be brushed off as a minor storyline. She is the gravitational center of the league's current growth. The ticket sales, the TV ratings, the surge in social media chatter, all of that has been supercharged by her presence. And this isn't just about what she does on the floor. It's about what she represents. Clark has become a gateway for casual fans, many of whom are watching the WNBA for the very first time. She's an entry point, a reason for people to care. So when those same fans tune in and watch her get shoved to the ground, blindsided on cuts, or hammered without the whistle blowing, it's not just bad optics, it's alienating. Fans see it. The media talks about it, and the league's silence screams louder than any press release could. The message being received is, we'll promote her, but we won't protect her. And that's where the legal danger grows. Title VII's hostile work environment standard doesn't require an employee to be verbally harassed, physically injured, or discriminated against in the traditional sense. It simply requires a pattern of unwelcome conduct that the employer fails to address. Conduct that makes it harder for the employee to do their job. For a professional athlete, doing the job means playing the sport under fair and safe conditions. If Clark's repeated targeting rises above the normal threshold of physical play and the WNBA fails to intervene, they've stepped into dangerous territory. It's important to remember that hostile work environment cases aren't just judged by whether the employee kept working. Courts look at whether the conduct was severe or pervasive enough to create a work atmosphere that a reasonable person would find abusive. Clark taking 17% of all the league's flagrant or hard fouls in a single season, more than double her peers, is the kind of stat that lawyers salivate over. That's not just bad luck or rookie treatment. That's a pattern that can be quantified and compared. And once lawyers start quantifying patterns, you can bet they'll also start digging into context. Who committed these fouls? Were they repeat offenders? What did officials do in the moment? Did the league take any proactive steps after incidents occurred? Were other players with similar star status protected differently? This is where the racial and professional resentment angle becomes more than just a media talking point. If attorneys can demonstrate that Clark is being targeted in ways other players are not, and that part of the reason for the lack of response is tied to her race or status as a newcomer, then the league's exposure grows exponentially. Suddenly, it's not just a hostile work environment case. It's a potential civil rights violation under federal law. The WNBA's leadership should be reading these warning signs like flashing neon. If they don't take control of the situation now, they risk having the narrative ripped out of their hands entirely. Once the legal system gets involved, everything becomes reactive. They won't be able to shape the story in the press. The story will be shaped by court filings, deposition transcripts, and whatever comes out in discovery. And here's the thing. The damage wouldn't stop with legal fees or potential settlements. The brand hit could be catastrophic. Sponsors who have hitched themselves to the Clark boom might quietly step back rather than be associated with a league accused of violating workplace protections. TV networks could grow wary of broadcasting games where the subtext isn't athletic excellence, but unchecked hostility toward the league's top draw. There's also the risk of losing Clark herself, not in some distant hypothetical, but in the very near future. If she feels unsupported, if she feels like her safety isn't a priority, why would she stay? Rival leagues and overseas teams are already circling, ready to offer more money, lighter schedules, and the promise of being valued in every sense of the word. The NBA has faced its share of criticism over officiating, but it's understood that stars, the ones who sell tickets and drive TV numbers, get a level of protection, not because they're fragile, but because the business model depends on them being on the floor and in the spotlight. Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, LeBron James. These players got foul hard at times, sure, but the league made sure those moments didn't become nightly occurrences. It was good business. Plain and simple. The WNBA seems to be ignoring that playbook entirely. Instead, they've let Clark's physical treatment become part of the entertainment package, as if the controversy itself is worth the risk. That might drive short-term headlines, but it's not a sustainable growth strategy. You can't build a brand around a player while simultaneously letting her be battered without consequence. And here's where the resentment factor becomes even more corrosive. If the league's silence is partially fueled by an unwillingness to favor Clark because of how much attention she gets, that's an emotional decision in a business that can't afford one. Protecting her on the court isn't favoritism. It's asset management. It's the same logic the NBA used to keep Shaquille O'Neal from being hacked on every possession, or to limit hand-checking when it slowed down star guards. But instead of leaning into that business reality, the WNBA has tiptoed around it. Perhaps out of fear of upsetting the veteran hierarchy, perhaps out of fear of fan backlash from those who already resent the hype. The irony is that this hesitance is what could cost them everything. If a lawsuit does happen, the hostile work environment framing will be easy for the public to grasp. The clips are already everywhere. The fouls are already cataloged. The comparisons to how other stars are treated are already being made by analysts and former players. The court of public opinion would be brutal, even before an actual court weighs in. That's why the WNBA's window for action is shrinking by the day. They need to establish clear, public guidelines for officiating, particularly around off-ball contact and retaliation fouls. They need to start enforcing those guidelines with meaningful consequences, suspensions, not just fines. And they need to make a point of saying loudly and clearly that protecting players is a non-negotiable part of their mission. Will that upset some players who've made physical play part of their identity? Absolutely. Will it cause grumbling about Clark getting special treatment? Without a doubt. But those are short-term headaches compared to the long-term damage of losing the player who's driving more growth than the league has ever seen. The alternative is to do nothing, keep letting her absorb the hits, and hope it all blows over. But that's not how patterns work. They don't blow over, they calcify. And when they calcify in a workplace, even one as unique as professional sports, they turn into case law. At that point, the WNBA wouldn't just be defending its handling of Caitlin Clark. It would be defending its very ability to claim provides a safe, professional environment for its players. That's a fight no league wants to be in, especially one that's finally on the brink of breaking into the mainstream. Caitlin Clark's rise should be the cleanest success story the WNBA has ever had. Young superstar arrives, transforms a business, lifts the visibility of every player and every team, and ushers in a new era of growth. That's a narrative the league should be protecting at all costs. Instead, they're letting a second, far darker narrative grow in its shadow, one about neglect, resentment, and rights that may already be in the process of being violated. And if they don't rewrite that script soon, they may find that it's no longer their story to tell. The WNBA is standing on a tightrope right now, and instead of focusing on balance, they seem to be looking everywhere except where their feet are. The Caitlin Clark situation isn't just a sports story anymore. It's morphing into a workplace safety and civil rights story. Once that shift happens, the stakes change entirely. It's no longer just about missed calls or tough defense. It becomes about whether the league is fulfilling its basic legal obligation to protect one of its employees from sustained, targeted harm. And the longer they let this pattern go unchecked, the more undeniable it becomes. The thing about hostile work environment cases is that they thrive on repetition. One isolated incident is easy to chalk up to bad luck or heat-of-the-moment competition. But when it happens again, and again, and again, and when the employer doesn't take concrete steps to stop it, it transforms into evidence. Not speculation, not opinion, evidence. For Clark, the evidence is piling up in high-definition, nationally broadcast footage. Every shove, every blindside hit, every hard foul that isn't answered with a meaningful consequence. It's all archived. Opposing players don't have to admit intent. The visual record tells a story. If this ever lands in court, no lawyer will need to dramatize anything. The clips speak for themselves. And here's the dangerous part for the WNBA. The legal bar for failure to act is impossibly high. They don't have to be proven complicit in orchestrating the hits. They simply have to be shown to have known about the targeting and not taken adequate steps to prevent it. The constant public discussion of Clark's treatment, the player quotes, the media outrage, all of that proves the league is aware. There's no plausible deniability here. So, why hasn't there been a more aggressive response? Some say it's about protecting the physicality of the game. Others point to the unwritten rule in sports that rookies, no matter how hyped, have to earn their place and respect. But those explanations crumble when you remember we're not talking about garden variety rookie hazing. We're talking about one player absorbing 17% of the league's total hard or flagrant fouls in her first season. That's statistical abnormality at the level of absurdity. There's another layer here that can't be ignored. The resentment factor. Caitlin Clark came into the WNBA not just with talent, but with a tidal wave of attention. She was already a household name before she ever stepped onto a pro court. She arrived with endorsements, record-breaking college viewership numbers, and the kind of media coverage most rookies can only dream of. And while that's good for the league's bottom line, it's inevitably going to create friction with players who've been grinding in relative obscurity for years. That friction might explain some of the targeting on the court, a make-her-earn-it mentality, but it doesn't excuse the league from stepping in. Professional jealousy isn't a legitimate reason to ignore workplace safety, and it's certainly not a legal shield in a civil rights case. And that's where this starts bleeding into the Title VII conversation in a way that's impossible for the WNBA to wish away. Title VII doesn't just prohibit harassment based on race, sex, or other protected categories. It also places responsibility on the employer to intervene when a hostile environment exists, whether it's coming from fellow employees, clients, or, in this case, other athletes in the same league. Right now, it's not clear which path they'll choose. But the clock is ticking, and if they don't move soon, someone else will choose for them.